The polling place phantom, an election day urban legend. In a small, unremarkable town tucked away in the countryside, election day is more than just a civic duty. It's a day of quiet dread. For as long as anyone can remember, there's been a legend that haunts the town. A story passed from generation to generation, whispered in hushed tones at family dinners or told in secret to newcomers. They call it the polling place phantom. It all began over a century ago. The year was 1908, a time when the town was much smaller and life moved at a slow, predictable pace. The people lived off the land and their lives were tied to the rhythms of farming, the changing seasons and the small but close-knit community that had stood unchanged for decades. But everything was about to change. That year's election was set to determine the town's future. On one side, a wealthy businessman new to the area had plans to industrialize, promising jobs, wealth and modernization. On the other side were the old-timers, farmers and families who wanted to preserve the town's way of life. The stakes were high, higher than they had ever been. Every vote mattered, especially in a town so small. Enter Harold Granger, a name that still sends shivers down the spines of those who speak it. Harold was a farmer, a man of few words, but everyone knew his vote would decide the election. Harold had made it clear he would vote for the candidate who promised to protect the town from the outside world. He was a man of principle, and his fellow townsfolk trusted him to stand up for what they believed in. But as the day wore on, Harold didn't show up at the polling station. The hours ticked by and concern spread through the town. Harold wasn't the type to break a promise. As sunset approached, his neighbors went to check on him. That's when they found him. Harold was dead. He was discovered in his barn, his body twisted in an unnatural way, his face frozen in a contorted expression of terror. Some said it looked like he had been scared to death, but no one could explain how. There were no marks of violence, no sign of struggle. Just Harold lying there, his vote left uncast. The town was in shock, but what happened next left them even more unsettled. The election went on without Harold's vote, and the businessman won by a single ballot. That night, a strange fog rolled into town, thicker than any the townspeople had ever seen. It settled in like a suffocating blanket, and with it came an uneasy feeling as though something or someone was watching. From that day forward, the town began to change. Factories were built where fields once stood. The quiet, peaceful community was soon filled with the noise of machinery, the air thick with smoke. The charm of the old town was gone, replaced by a cold, industrial landscape. Many believed Harold's death was no accident, that he had been silenced to sway the vote. But that wasn't the end of the story. On the next election day, something strange happened. Just as the polling station was about to close, a figure appeared at the door. The volunteers there didn't recognize him, but the way he moved, slow and deliberate, sent a chill through the air. He wore an old-fashioned suit, the kind you'd expect to see in a photograph from another century. A wide-brimmed hat cast a shadow over his face, hiding his features. He walked, not hurriedly, but with a kind of eerie purpose, straight to the voting booth. No one said a word. They just watched in frozen silence as he took his ballot, marked it, and slipped it into the box. He never spoke. He never made eye contact, and just as quietly as he had entered, he turned and left. By the time someone worked up the courage to follow him, he was gone, vanished into thin air. The next morning, when the votes were counted, the outcome of the election was a shock. The results had been close, but that one vote, his vote, had tipped the scales. The election had been decided by the mysterious stranger who had come in the night. The townspeople were unnerved, but what could they do? Life went on, as it always does. But year after year on election day, the figure would return, always at the last minute, always without a word, and always his vote would decide the outcome. No one ever saw him clearly. Some claim they recognized the suit, a style popular in the early 1900s. Others swore they felt a cold breeze whenever he was near, even in the sweltering heat of summer. There were whispers that the man was Harold Granger, returning from beyond the grave to cast the vote that had been stolen from him all those years ago. Others believed something darker was at work, that the figure wasn't Harold at all, but a manifestation of the town's guilt, a reminder of how easily democracy could be corrupted by fear, greed, and death. Some even said that anyone who tried to stop him would meet the same fate as Harold, a silent, inexplicable death, their face twisted in fear. And so the town lives in quiet dread of election day. Each time it comes around, the air feels heavier, the shadows seem longer, and a sense of foreboding hangs over the polling place. The volunteers count the hours, watching the clock, hoping this year will be different, but he won't come. But every year, just before the polls close, he arrives, the polling place phantom, silent, unseen, yet always felt. His vote always the last to be cast, his presence always the last to leave. And then, just like that, he's gone, until the next election day. Some say it's Harold Granger, forever bound to the town, doomed to cast the vote he never could in life. Others say it's something more sinister. A spirit not of this world, but born of the corruption and darkness that lies beneath the surface of the town's history. But one thing is certain. If you're ever at the polling place in that small town on election day, and you feel a chill in the air, or see a shadow that seems out of place, you'll know. The polling place phantom has come to cast his vote. And once he has, nothing will ever be the same.